How's it going, y'all? Today, I'd like to talk about my new player experience in Warframe as a longtime Destiny 2 player. In this video, I will go over some of the pros and cons of being a fresh Tenno, along with my own thoughts on Warframe as a whole. First, it is important to note that Destiny and Warframe are by no means the same game. However, there is enough overlap that I can recommend Destiny Guardians looking to try something new will pretty quickly find a home with the Tenno of Warframe. Before I go too deep into the ins and outs of Warframe, some of the modes and activities I mentioned are unlocked through campaign, so there will not be any strict spoilers, but if you want to remain completely free of those, this is your warning. Now, Warframe has best been described to me as a game within a game within a game. From flying through space in your railjack, to roguelike souls modes, to hunting a lich for sweet loot, to snowboarding and open world content. I mean, you can even customize your living space, which you do get even more options for later on. Warframe kind of seems to have something for everybody. I won't talk about the actual story of Warframe today, since that is something that I think you should experience on your own, but I can say without a doubt, DE's creative team put together a pretty complex narrative and a very enjoyable story that, as a D2 lore nerd, I have had a field day with. I've completed all of the campaigns, each more enjoyable than the last for the most part, and even then, I still have only scratched the surface of what the Tenno story has in store. It's not without its issues as a game, however. I mean, there are bugs, occasional game crashes, but those are few and far between and don't really take away from my overall enjoyment. And even with those being said, DE, from what I've seen so far, has done a really good job of responding to bugs and getting a pretty good release schedule for stuff like that. And if you're like me, you really like build crafting characters in MMOs, whether it be min-maxing damage, trying something crazy and new, or customizing every inch of my character's drip. I mean, there's just something to be said about making a character your own inside games like Warframe and Destiny. While I do have more than 100 hours in this game since I started back in January, I am by no means an expert at any of this yet. So I highly encourage you to look up some of the amazing content creators in this community who have been putting in a lot of work into making the information readily available and digestible for all players. Now, this kind of leads me into my first negative of the Warframe experience for players. Since this game is so massive, it can be pretty overwhelming. Luckily, I've had some help from good friends of mine to guide me through some of the menus and other details that I might have overlooked without knowing what I was even looking at, really. And even to players like them, we still are learning stuff every single time we get on almost about how things drop and where things go. And I'll link it down in the description below, but the wiki is probably one of your best resources for finding any information that some of these videos may not necessarily give you. When it comes to diving into gameplay, though, Warframe has so many options for creating fun and engaging combat. Currently boasting a total of 59 frames, not including the prime variations, to choose from. And it is good to note, though, that the prime frames really only offer minimal stat increases and some cosmetic changes that can be pretty cool depending on what your opinion is. And for example, a prime frame might only have 50 or more energy than its base counterpart, so it's not a huge increase or decrease. Warframes range in a variety of different playstyles like melee, gun buff, nuking, and even using summons to fight at your side. You can even mod your frame to be capable of more than one type of combat loot, depending on the config you use. But make sure you take your time to find a loadout that works for you, because yeah, it'll matter in the end game, so take your time to get there. This leads me into my next topic: upgrading your frames and weapons. There are a few important things to know, though, before really diving into it. When first starting out, any mods are good mods. And while objectively that isn't entirely true, I would encourage new Tenno to not focus heavily on build crafting until you've completed campaigns and done every mission node on planets, because those do naturally give you progression towards getting to better builds. It is also important to know that joining a clan can be really helpful in jump-starting this journey when it comes to getting blueprints for weapons and other items. Joining the clan is helpful, and finding a clan with a higher rank is also important when it comes to doing it especially if you're by yourself, because the higher the rank of the clan, the better items that they have for you to get from their research. So to do that, you can either go to the clan section under the featured clans and ask for an invite, or go on to Discord or Reddit and other social media platforms and try to find some of the more popular beginner-friendly clans to join, because there's always people out there trying to help new Tenno gain experience and become more immersed in the world of Warframe. One of the big things that drew me to Warframe was the free-to-play aspect. Now, with gaming, sometimes free-to-play games favor those that spend more money on microtransactions, and there are some ways for players in Warframe to get ahead by spending money. But the key distinction with Warframe, I believe, is one, the fact that there is an in-game trading system that allows players to trade plat, which is the paid currency, for most in-game items. Which means that if you decide to play completely free, some of the items that you earn can actually be traded for plat, which can then in turn be traded in the in-game market for Warframes and other items that's paid. Another good way to spend that plat that you earn, though, is through the third-party website Warframe Market. And this is actually, coincidentally enough, the best way to make plat from the items that you earn, because it is not just a place for you to buy, but also to sell. This is where I've sold mods, bought mods, other arcanes, and some other stuff that you get on later down the road. And it is just a generally helpful tool that I'll also link down in the description below. But it is important to note that not all weapons are purchasable with plat, and in fact, some of the best weapons in the game cannot be bought with plat. So that's another way to let the free-to-play players and people that really just want to grind out without any sort of fiscal commitment, that they're going to earn something just like the people that might get there a little bit earlier just due to their grind being increased by cutting some of those grind times with money. But everybody will have to get to certain points of just grinding the game, the missions, and something called standing, which I'm about to get to in a little bit, to get access to some of these endgame weapons and mods and items such as that. Another really good thing about the free-to-play system with this game is that while yes, there is stuff that you can buy that is in-game related, all of the stuff that actually affects gameplay is all earnable completely for free, which I think is a fantastic thing to do in free-to-play games. As I just mentioned standing earlier, it is important to note that there are different ways of earning standing for different groups. Not every group is the same, because each planet will have its own resources and bounties, particularly to that planet, that you need to complete in order to level up their standing. Standing is important because these vendors will give you access to mods for Warframes, materials to craft things with, cosmetic items, and some other cool stuff that I won't necessarily get into, but definitely don't avoid leveling up Deimos. It's pretty important for later on. But by completing bounties and trading in your items that you complete on these missions, it can be pretty efficient once you get into a little bit of a routine as far as completing them, to get those vendors leveled up and your standing maxed out. Because once you get to, I think, tier 5, it caps out at around 132,000 standing per vendor. So you can spend that pretty frequently, and then once you get it up to tier 5, it's all just about replenishing that standing. So it becomes a little bit more of a routine in the end than a grind. Right behind where you can look for your syndicates, you can find your codex. This, similar to the wiki, is where you can access all of the in-game information that is important to your journey so far, from quests to mods you've earned, to even where you can find the mods and other items in game. It can be a pretty useful tool and doesn't require you to tab over or pull out your phone in order to look at the wiki. Now, this about wraps up my overview of what it's like being a longtime Destiny player jumping into the expansive world of Warframe. Before I let you go, there are a few more key pieces of information I'd like to leave you with. If you start to look up builds for frames or weapons you might be interested in, there's a good chance that creator or post will mention Steel Path. And as a new Tenno, don't really worry about building some crazy Steel Path build, because those mods are probably out of reach for you, and some of the weapons may not even be at the MR rank that you're currently working with, which brings me into my next point, which is MR. And MR is what you level up when you max out warframes, weapons, and other companions and things that you bring on and attach to your character whenever you go and start completing bounties and doing missions and campaigns and stuff like that. And the general cap for what you need in order to experience all of the content is MR16, because that's the rank that you would be able to use all of the previously aforementioned best guns in the game, which are the free-to-play route. Because while yes, those are also locked behind, the standing that we mentioned earlier and some of the other, grind methods that you have to use in order to get there, MR rank inevitably will also prevent you from using those weapons. So while that is something to remember moving forward, don't focus too heavily on it. And if you get to a point where you really need to grind it, an effective method that I found was when you go into your Warframe and you select your weapons and melee and secondary and stuff like that, you can find, while scrolling down the menu, some of them are available for credits, and you can buy them and then craft them and then level them up for mastery, and then you can sell them. And the reason that's important is because some of the weapons that you will earn in the campaign, you can craft and level them up for MR, but I wouldn't sell them, because the order to reacquire them later on in the game requires a pretty decent amount of time. So if you want to avoid that extra pain, just throw away your easy Mark 1 weapons and some of that other cheap stuff that you can get for credits that you won't really necessarily use and can always buy again. And it's just a pretty simple way and neat thing that I found recently. And because funny enough, not even I'm MR16 yet, so even I'm still working on getting there so I can have access to some of these really cool weapons here in the end. I would also like to say that if you plan to jump into the game, right now is a perfect time to get into it, because coming up here on March 19th, we will be getting a pretty lengthy update called Technorite Encore, which brings content to 1999 expansion, which you can also demo for free in your Orbiter if you go over here to the right and look inside your little computer panel. You can remember here and test it for free, a free demo. It brings new quality of life changes, as well as the 60th Warframe Temple, which I am personally excited to start building when the update drops next week. And that about wraps up the video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope that each and every one of you had at least a little bit of information gleaned upon you about what it's like to be a new player in Warframe coming from a D2 player's perspective. If you have any questions about anything in the video, feel free to leave a comment down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great day.